All right, it's Thanksgiving, and I'm doing my usual routine because that's what I do. Every day is a holiday for me. All right, we're going to get through this Jarrett Walker board presentation, and I don't care how long it takes because got to get through this. This goddamn, look at how long that meeting is, 4 hours and a half, and I'm only past 1 hour. See, these meetings are so long and drab that nobody's ever going to pay attention, and I think that's part of the reasons that they do this is they don't want anybody paying attention because it's a cash cow, for all the people involved with it at this level. And so let's hear what's going on. Let's try to finish this up right now.
There are some social benefits to transit, even in the low-density areas, in terms of providing service to people who might be elderly or who don't have a car or choose not to have a car, which might be a good thing for society all in all. So there is some question in my mind about the value of these from a pure economic standpoint, but from a social benefit standpoint, I think the equation might be a little more positive.
And the balancing of productivity versus...
See, this is the problem we're having with our country today, is everything is neoliberal. That means the cost is always a defining thing, except for the military-industrial complex, which has blank checks. They get billions of dollars of increases every year. Nobody talks about it. It's completely hidden from the rest of us because the mainstream media is nothing but a brainwashing technique. They could have excellent public transportation, but they'd rather be killing people, and Americans are basically just conditioned to accept all of this crap around us, including our marginal public transportation.
Social benefit goals is your job. Right? That's what you get to figure out, and we're going to come back to that.
Yeah.
Because yes, people are coming at you with a variety of different expectations, and we will sort through those goals in a moment. So that's essentially what it means. Here's what it looks like with cars with drivers on the left. Partial uptake of driverless cars, which is what we will probably all we will probably see in any of our lifetimes, which is when some cars are driverless, some aren't, and as a result, you still need the kind of vehicle spacing that assumes that they're human drivers. And then when we get to the high ridership bus, which is potentially driverless, the geometry won't change at all. Any other comments on the whole issue of technology and automation before we get back to basics here?
So the concept of
here he comes,
technology
Mr.
not changing geography, of course, that tends to be an absolute. But technology can change behavior, which can impact the utilization of geography. So if we utilize technology to then not require the movement of people as much as we do today, then that changes the equation.
Right.
I mean, if I don't have to leave my house to essentially go to work or go to the local Best Buy to pick up something, then that's going to change again how we leverage geography and how we utilize it. So that can have an impact.
Right.
And we do see some of that changing and adjusting, or at least we have over the last, say decade with telecommuting. Now you hear some of the conversations saying, well, more and more companies are moving away from telecommuting because they're just not as efficient. But, as we look at the onset of, the dramatic increase in home delivery of things, the home delivery can dramatically change, the way that we use low capacity vehicles to just run to the grocery store or run into this. And so that's going to be an interesting dynamic because, for me, I do a cost benefit analysis just to run to Best Buy now because it's, I can drive there myself and spend an hour to an hour and a half just going round trip, or I can wait a day and I can have it delivered, directly to my door. And it costs me $15, which, just that $15 is saved in just time.
Right.
So, that dynamic isn't quite included in the conversation of technology doesn't change geography, but technology can have, this impact that I don't think we quite know what that pure impact's going to be.
So I think you're talking about a different issue, which is that technology has the potential to reduce transportation demand overall by somewhat reducing the need to go places. Now, I would emphasize in the case of deliveries that somebody from Best Buy drove to you, which is not that different from you driving to them in terms of vehicle miles traveled, right? There was still a vehicle trip there one way or another, and maybe it was more efficient because they went around dropping off a bunch of things. There probably was some efficiency there. Telecommuting, we all have our own feelings about it. I think there's a reason companies are going back to it. Think about, certainly,
They're going away
in
from
any
it.
sort of industry that has any creativity involved, everyone's finding that you just can't do this over Skype. That you just have to be in the same room a lot of the time. And, you think about what Google and Apple and all these big Silicon Valley companies spend to run enormous fleets of buses from San Francisco, where lots of their employees live, all the way down to their suburban campuses. It's 35, 40 miles. It's like going to Salem. And they wouldn't do that, if they could just plug in their employees at home and have it be the same experience. It's not. It's not. There's that stuff that happens only when you're in the same room. Now, nobody can predict, whether virtual reality or something else is going to change that. But I would say, even if transportation demand goes down a little bit, there's a lot of it that's pretty inelastic. People are not going to be able to phone in a job cleaning dishes at a restaurant, right? There are, and particularly when you think about lower wage jobs, they're a lot.
Right. All the people that aren't part of the tech or the banking sector or any of the elite positions, because what we have in our society is we have what I consider to be an apartheid system, but the apartheid isn't based on race, it's based on money now. That's how far things have changed. And the people without money are basically second-class citizens. I mean, it might as well be an apartheid system, really, based on race, because it's the same thing. But it's not race anymore, it's changed to money, which is amazing to me how this is morphed from a race kind of issue, although, they still bring up race, but the oligarchs like to bring up race because it stimulates the discord between citizens. Meanwhile, the oligarchs they're controlling everything around us, and citizens are not aware of how their entire lives are controlled by forces outside of them. It's been so beautifully hidden from people. It amazes me at just how good the oligarchy has gotten at farming human beings, because basically we're just farm animals at this point. We don't really have free will. Everything is controlled by the money system. Our entire existence is controlled by money now. It's basically a de-evolution, because spiritually the human race is pretty bankrupt. As bad as it was during the Nazis, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, they don't use concentration camps anymore to exterminate people. They use bombs now, and you don't get to see it on the mainstream media because it's carefully hidden. Just like the Nazis didn't tell anybody they were gassing Jews. It's the same thing here. They're killing millions of people from the Middle East, and we don't get to know about it.
A lot of them are going to be relatively inelastic. You really have to go and do what you're doing. Then beyond that, we're in a space of speculation. I mean, yes, transportation demand may go down. I don't know that, because I think history shows we are pretty bad at predicting the actual social and cultural impacts of technologies. I don't think we have a good track record of doing that generally, and so I would expect there to be surprises.
Central planning doesn't have a good track record at anything, okay? Government does not have a good track record at anything. There is no successful government anywhere in the world, and that includes ours, as we watch the wealth gap grow and more citizens become socially excluded, dispossessed. There's no government in the world that has succeeded in helping its citizens. All it does is suck from the citizens. That's my opinion, of course.
I would expect it to not work out quite the way anyone expects at this point. But the geometry is still going to be there, right? I mean, to the extent that we have to move around in physical space, and I think we do have to move around in physical space to just show up for one another in the ways that create all kinds of possibilities of life. And I think we will still have this problem. The problem will still have that geometric shape.
And so I completely agree with the problem of the geometric shape, but it's part of our challenge is we have to try and predict. I mean, because everything that we're planning now, is going to, impact us in the future. And if we get behind, the curve of.
Yeah, they're going to have to predict, because that's what they do, because they have this cash flow, okay? It's called Trimet. It steals money from taxpayers, whether they use Trimet or not. So you have this tax farm, I call them tax farms. And the tax farm has to decide what they're going to do with all the money. And of course, they're not going to give it to the people in terms of services. They're going to give it to the elites in terms of capital projects. And this isn't just Trimet. This is around the whole country. This is a major point that people don't understand. You don't get your taxes don't go to you. And if you're lucky to get Social Security, you'll get a little bit of that money back. But even that, they're trying to take away now. Your taxes go to support the elite structures. And you're on your own when it comes to your own life.
Transportation planning and construction, then we miss out, and we can miss it by a couple of decades, and it takes a long time and a lot of money to catch up.
They've already missed out, okay? The traffic is gridlocked. The transit system is overcrowded and ridership is off. They've already blown it. This is why I'm always surprised that people actually support giving them more money. They have a track record of failure. And what purpose would it give to give these people more of your money? They've already failed. They failed at stopping the traffic. The light rail was supposed to stop the traffic. That was the whole purpose of it. Oh, we here in Portland have decided to build light rail instead of highways. Well, now you have gridlock and you have a transit system that hasn't done anything about the gridlock. It actually seems to me to have made it worse, if you ask me.
Right. So part of my mind just races in the thoughts of, how do we take this information and then incorporate it into the conversation as we do the future of transportation planning, and we are predicting, I think, and as an agency, how do we look at, since the geometry is not changing, how do we look at leveraging it differently and, encouraging. Again, we've got some, we're looking out 10, 20, 30 years as we do our transportation planning, but also community planning needs to follow in that same vein. I mean, if we're putting things closer to the consumer that they are constantly using, in more high-density areas. I live in a high-density building in Gresham, and, I've got the majority of services within a half mile of what I use. I'm 3 blocks from the local coffee shop. I'm actually about 6 blocks from Best Buy. So I don't actually have to drive to Best Buy. I can just walk.
All right, pontificator, shut up.
It's kind of cool. It's just one stop. I still could walk, but it's just fun taking the Max.
Oh yeah.
So
you're so
cute. So as I look at the big picture, as I go out,
all right,
and I completely appreciate.
Move forward. I don't want to hear him. All right.
So to pick up on Travis Stoll's comment. One of the things that's interesting to think about is, what if, just suppose, we as a society decided that we can't actually predict the future? That we can't actually predict the future, particularly on matters of of inventions and how they're going to interact with human culture. What would we do instead? How would we decide what to do? Because I come from a point of view, and this may be my humanities background, that I've been really trained to be suspicious of self-motivated, speech of all time. And a lot of what we are getting that's shaping our conversation is essentially advertising. Right?
Yeah,
is
he said it.
essentially corporate messages or messages of inventors who want us to like their invention and plan their invention. And
yeah, he's right about that.
and so we're getting all of this speculation, frankly, about what the future is going to be like in response to various inventions, and it's all very much tied up with the fact that people are trying to sell us inventions, right? And so I tend to want to take a big step back from that and sort of think, okay, if I factor all that out, what's left? And what's left in the face of the fact that we're actually not very good. History shows we're not very good at predicting the interaction of human culture and technology, right? When the the smartphone, as it evolved, does not look like anything that anyone was really imagining, 10, 15 years before it was invented. It's something different. The effect of the smartphone on our lives, the fact that people are walking around looking at them and crashing into things, the fact that we have all of these secondary impacts now of people spending too much time on screens, none of that was really out there at the time. So we don't know. And I like to pause for the moment in not knowing and try to think about what could we do even if we didn't know. And so one way to think about that is to think about the wall around your life.
The wall around your life.
What it would mean if our fundamental product were actually freedom. So one of the things about the whole conversation that we live in, the whole public policy conversation around transportation, is that we're constantly talking in various ways about this so-called triple bottom line, right? We are looking at economic benefits of what we do. We are looking at environmental benefits of what we do, and we are looking at social benefits of what we do. And almost everything that anyone has ever wanted out of transit or out of transportation in general.
At least you put economic first, because it's all about the money as everything else.
At least at the policy level, has fit into one of those general categories. And the thing I want you to notice about the triple bottom line, about the environmental, economic, and social outcomes, is that they are all the result of a managed society. They are all the result of government policy doing things and people doing certain things in response to those impacts.
Yep.
And the ultimate model is deterministic.
Right.
The whole idea that the future is predictable is the idea that human beings are not going to surprise you. So when we do a 20-year plan, for example, and we're looking at, modelers are looking at human behavior today and using that to predict the background of human behavior 20 years from now. When I'm talking to groups of young people, I always say, please remember that when we do long-range transit planning, we are assuming that when you're the same age that your parents are now, you'll behave exactly the way they do. Right? We have to assume for long-range planning that you are a copy of your parents. This just goes right down their spines. This is not what they want to hear. And what's more, it's not fair to them, because in fact, society proceeds through surprises. Actually, it is through children surprising their parents that society moves forward. You can go back and study periods of extreme stasis in history, like ancient Egypt or the Middle Ages, and those were precisely placed at times when children did exactly what their parents had done, and so nothing really changed. And so, how do we keep open that possibility of surprise? I think this is related also to trying to address why people who come from a more conservative perspective bristle at the whole concept of us being able to, of the managed society. Bristle at the whole concept that, we bureaucrats have got it figured out and know what to do to cause people to do things that will create these outcomes. Because what's missing there is freedom, right? What's missing there is, what's being limited there is the human sensation of having choices. The human sensation of being able to do different things rather than just sort of the thing that the system is expecting you to do. The ability, in short, the freedom to surprise. And when I think about this is fairly radical stuff, but it's sort of what I have been forced to philosophically, as I have spent 25 years listening to predictions and trying to think about what predictions are and what the limitations are of prediction. And we all, of course, you all live in a larger structure. The federal government, FDA wants predictions. Everybody wants predictions, but we should just sort of pause over how much we should really believe about prediction and about what prediction really is. Because, again, prediction implies that the belief that the future is predictable is a belief.
It's just amazing to me that he can. He's been talking for a long time. He's not using any notes or anything. He's just reciting this material off from his memory, which tells you something about his memory. It must be fantastic.
Belief that people are not very free. Because if people are free, they're free to surprise you in ways that will disrupt your prediction. I think that's the core idea. And So I've tried to think more and more, and our firm thinks more and more about, okay, how can I describe an exciting future that doesn't require me to predict? And this is what we've come up against. We've come up with, as a response to that, what if our goal were actually human freedom? And what if the secondary goals, the livable city, the vibrant economy, the environmental benefits, the social benefits, were not a result of people doing things we predict, but simply a result of people being free to do whatever they want? And is there a way, ultimately, to sort of bring together the sort of managed society perspective that so often comes from the left with the conservative perspective, which is very much uncomfortable with that and much more concerned about a primal sensation of freedom, in talking about it this way? And that's what our firm is experimenting with, basically, in the work we do. So this is a way to draw a picture of that. So this happens to be from a study we did in Silicon Valley. That's a hypothetical woman named Jane. We have plopped, she can be plopped down anywhere in the city. And this little tool shows me where she could be on public transit plus walking in 15, 30, 45, or 60 minutes. Those are the concentric blobs in this image. The largest, the pink blob, where she could be in 60 minutes. And I want you to notice that insofar as doing things requires going places, which is not everything, but still a lot of things, this is a map of the wall around her life. If you want to put it negatively, which is sometimes vivid, you could say that we're all in prison. We're all in a prison defined by the limits of where we could get to in a reasonable amount of time. And what if our job were simply to move those walls outward so people could get to more things, therefore have more choices, therefore be more free? Now, the interesting thing about this is that it also does pick up a lot of the standard criteria that we're often bringing to this. This is a map of access to jobs and opportunity, for example, as we tend to talk about that in the social context, in the context of access to jobs and opportunity for lower income people, for people who need help getting onto the ladder. But it's also so much more than that. Jane cannot hold, if a job is not in these blobs, Jane can't hold that job. Jane cannot go to a school that is not in these blobs. She's probably not going to date and marry anyone who isn't in these blobs, because there's only so much of that you can do on the internet. Sooner or later, you've got to be able to get together physically, and that means they've got to be reasonably close. And so this captures so much of what it actually...
That's why they invented cars, Jarrett. Okay. Contrary to the popular belief, cars are not evil, okay? It's evil that they've been turned into status symbols in this country and gas hogs, and they're so environmentally destructive. But cars themselves are not evil. That's why people have them, because of this limitation here. He's absolutely right.
Means for a human being to be able to do things in a city. And let's remember, and this is also coming back to Travis's point earlier, that yes, we may be able to do more and more over the internet. We may be able to do more and more virtually. But if so, why live in a city? Right? The point of spending more to live in a city is to be physically close to people.
Yes.
You can go out and live in small town Eastern Oregon if you're going to have all of your life virtually, and it'll be a lot cheaper. There is still a reason we are in the city. And it is to meet other people physically, not just to be online with them. And so, there are people, for example, who are speculating that cities will...
And that's why I don't live in the city anymore and will never live in a city again. There's too many goddamn people.
Will, in fact, stop growing, and places like Burns will start growing because we'll have such excellent virtual reality that you can be anywhere you want. That's way out there, and I'm certainly not going to make that kind of prediction. I try to make as few predictions as possible, is sort of my point. So think about this as a way to talk about the outcomes of public transit planning, because that's what we do in our company. Every transit plan we do, we're looking at these. And as we're going through the network design, we're looking at these and saying, have we made these better? And we're tweaking always to make these better. Because ultimately, give the greatest possible freedom to the greatest possible number of people, and in my view, that's the ultimate recipe for the most ridership. So, and again, just not to emphasize this too many times, the cool thing about freedom is that it sits in between the network and the ridership prediction. This has always been happening inside the black boxes of ridership models. We are always trying to make it visible because it's really interesting if you take it apart and look at it. Because the way a transit network produces access, i.e. physical freedom, the way a transit network improves people's ability to get more places and have more options in their lives is a purely geometric fact. It goes from the design of the network, the pattern of frequencies and connections and lines and everything else. I can derive mathematically what that blob is going to look like. And if I stop there, I have an extremely high level of confidence because all I've talked about is geometry. We are sure that pi will have the same value in 2100, We will still be sure in 2100 that big things don't fit into small spaces. It's that sort of geometric knowledge we have. Very sure of it. Getting from that to the ridership prediction is a much more subjective and difficult business of trying to extrapolate from things about human behavior. It's to do that we have to predict that everyone's a copy of their parents, for example. It's to do that, that we have to make these highly speculative leaps about how things are going to change or assuming that things are not going to change. And so another reason I've been asking myself, what could we do just with freedom without going to that, is that I am sure of it in a way that I am not sure about a ridership prediction. And most of the people I know who do prediction professionally, when I get them aside and chat with them, they understand this philosophical problem. They think about it. Their job is to make predictions as the least unreliable predictions they can make, but they understand these issues.
Has your firm done any reverse look in years to where we are today based on what futurists indicated would be available to us in technology and attitude?
All right, well, this is going to go on a long time, so this is probably going to be a 10-part video for me because this is just going on and on and on. I'm not sure why he's doing this because Trimet, they already know what they're going to do, all right? They're going to expand their capital projects. So what he's saying is all very nice, and I agree with most of it. The guy's obviously knows what he's talking about, and, I even sense a little hint of a revolutionary in there, believe it or not. Some of his stuff is pretty revolutionary in some of his ideas, but he's so hooked into this mainstream neoliberal public transportation complex that he's can't really be a revolutionary because that's how he makes his living here. And I always have this problem when I look at all of these people who are controlling the future of transit riders' lives, and none of these people have any understanding of a transit rider's life. And I always come back to the same point, that you cannot work within a system that's structured to completely keep the people out of it. The people that use it have no voice here, no voice. And so how can you work in a system that's designed like that? You can't work in this system. That's why I am against the system. Yes, I'll admit it finally. I finally will admit I am a United States public transportation hater because the system is cruel and unusual punishment, not just for the riders, but for the employees. And the reason for that is the people that are running it have no understanding of what it's like to operate a system or to ride a system. They're elitists, and we cannot work with a system that's run by elitists.